Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Kirby on Sports podcast exclusively on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. As always, a big thanks to our sponsors, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate, Barrett Pest and Termite Services, Mark Lynch with Guild Mortgage, Shenandoah Music, and the official energy drink of the Kirby on Sports podcast, Don't Sleep Energy. Always great people over there. A lot of great things coming out for them as well. Coming up, we have the newest member of WJLA's ABC7 News out of Washington, D.C., Natalie Spala. She came from Metro Detroit, went to University of Michigan, Dearborn. She played college basketball before transitioning into the broadcast role with stops in Michigan, Traverse City, Charleston, South Carolina, now making her way to the DC market. We'll talk about all of that with her and so much more, all coming your way next on the Kirby on Sports podcast. Stick right here with us. Once again, welcome back to another Kirby on Sports exclusively on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. Let's not waste any more time. The newest member in a great connection so far, as I met her at Commander's Training Camp Day 1, Miss Natalie Spala. Natalie, how are you? I'm sure the move into DC quickly, but how are you settling in still?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me, Josh. And first, I love the intro. You got me ready to run through a wall for you. So all for it right there. But yeah, no, thank you so much. About 3 weeks now in DC. I got to apologize for the echo. My apartment's still pretty empty. So to address the elephant in the room, but yeah, we're moving in, we're moving on, and everyone has just been so great here in DC. I know Josh, you and I were talking just a few minutes ago, just about how welcoming everyone is, the media, just everyone. There's just such a camaraderie between this group, and it's awesome because a lot of these people have been covering these teams for years, for decades, and you can definitely tell because everyone knows these teams like the back of their hand. So for have them welcoming a girl who's been here for 5 seconds has just been a very welcoming treat.
Does that make things easier in a regard that everybody's so welcoming, getting you acclimated since your transition from Charleston, which we'll get into later, to here comes right at like the busiest sports time, at least in my mind? I could be wrong there because I don't really follow the trends, but with training camp and the football season right around the corner, a big market switch into the DC market must be really, really tough. And just the transition, take me through that. And what sort of led you to the opportunity here in DC?
Yeah, well, again, it's just been a world of a difference to have kind of a new environment. I've never really been to the DC area before, so to be welcomed by so many people has been an absolute treat. I would have never expected that to happen. But yeah, when you're in press conference rooms at training camp and you don't know a soul essentially, but to have people come up to you, introduce themselves, say, I'm so-and-so with this affiliate. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me anytime you need help. incredible. So I can't stress that enough, how helpful that's been. But yeah, no, you definitely hit it right on the head. I would assume training camp is the busiest time of the year, getting really back into the swing of things. I know football season is marked on everyone's calendar, especially here in the DC area, especially to come at an era where there is just so much new and so much excitement. I genuinely don't think I could have come at a better time. But yeah, no, just to kind of go back and talk about my transition, I was in Charleston doing news and sports for the last 2 years. Loved everything about my Charleston experience. I was able to kind of do a little bit of everything, which is always a blessing and a curse when you're kind of still young in this industry. But you really get acclimated to doing the writing, doing the producing, doing the shooting, working on deadline all the time. So when you come here to DC, I feel like a little spoiled because I don't have to do as much. I'm not running around with a chicken with my head cut off half the time, but it's still such an adjustment, just like learning things and having to know things and know connections and know even being at FedEx, which way I go to the locker room, which way I go to the press box. So like those kind of new things will still take some time and adjustments. But overall, yeah, it's been 3 weeks. I feel like it's been 3 years, but it's been a great 3 years if that's the case.
So rewinding to practically the beginning here, raised in Detroit, went to University of Michigan, Dearborn, and played college basketball for 4 years. So I have to ask, was it dead set that, oh man, I wanted to cover sports, or when you got in to play college basketball, sort of the transition into I want to just keep covering sports because I love sports. Take us through what sort of got you to the news industry, sports news industry in that aspect.
Yeah, no, good question. It's always my favorite to ask people that as well, because being in this industry, no one has the same path forward. Everyone is so different. And I think that's what makes this industry so special, because it took me up into my junior year to realize that this is what I wanted to do with my life. So pretty late on in college, but I'd grown up in a sports family, grew up playing kind of every sport. Brothers played football. I did cheer, soccer, cross country, track, softball, basketball. So kind of everything. My parents, I was super blessed to kind of, they threw us into everything. And we were, I guess, pretty lucky with our athletic genes. That goes back to both my parents. My dad played college football in Detroit at Wayne State University. So sports have always been kind of just around us, and we have been immersed in that kind of atmosphere all of our lives. So I always knew I wanted to do something with sports. I just had no idea kind of what that looked like. So when I got to college, had a great 4 years at U of M Dearborn. It took me up until my junior year. And it's funny because it's always something you see on TV first and you say, hey, that looks kind of cool. I think that would be kind of fun. And of course, you know nothing about what actually goes into everything. So that was kind of my perspective. I had said, hey, you know, I see people on the sidelines doing things all the time, local news. I'm like, it looks kind of cool. Maybe I should explore that a little more, but never really knew the means to get into something like that until my junior year of college, which is where I did 2 internships at the Fox affiliate in Detroit with their sports department. And that is truly where I think it clicked for me. Because I mean, Detroit, I was at Comerica Park, I was at the Palace at the time, and kind of doing different things and seeing the behind the scenes of it. And I think that's where a lot of people's love really and respect for it actually comes, because you see it on TV, you see the glamour and the prettiness and the cleanness of it all, but then you don't see the kind of the grind to make sure you're grabbing all the info, you're grabbing your interviews to really just set up that minute and a half on TV. So that's where it all began. But then, yeah, you mentioned it. I spent my first 2 years in Northern Michigan in Traverse City. Beautiful area. I recommend anyone go to Traverse City if you haven't. It's my favorite place on earth. Will always probably be that way. But yeah, I was able to kind of, you grind your first few years when you're doing it, being an MMJ, you're doing the shooting, you're doing the editing, and you're, like I said, running around like a crazy person half the time. But you just kind of, work your way up. Did the last 2 years in Charleston where I was able to do news and sports again. But being in a full-time sports position has always been my goal. So to be able to achieve that goal, and not only achieve that goal, but to be able to do it in such a huge and diverse and wonderful market like DC is definitely a treat.
Forgive me, I didn't really have time to research the stats on your playing career, but how'd your
You don't
playing
need to do
career
that.
go? I don't know how your playing career go. Did any big memories from your time playing college basketball there?
I think my biggest memory is just it was such a new program, but in those 4 years, we had I just remember it as there wasn't a lot of resources, not a lot of attention to this program, but you could kind of, even just in the 4 years of me being there, you could kind of see just the love and respect that the departments and the university was showing to the sports department. So that was kind of my biggest takeaway. And it was, I mean, we were just a bunch of girls, young women who just loved the game. And we were willing to really just do everything to continue. It was such a blessing to be able to play college sports. And that's something that I will always be proud of as being a part of my past. But yeah, it was just a great time with a lot of great friends that I still keep in contact to this day. So that's another thing that, just super blessed, super lucky that was able to be a part of my journey.
You mentioned the favorite event you covered is March Madness, obviously because of basketball. Do you think you have a slight competitive edge in covering basketball because you played 4 years of college basketball?
I would say so a little bit. And I don't know if competitive edge is the right word, but I can definitely just my love for it is just so evident that it's just super fun. And when the time comes for basketball season to roll around, I know I will be having the time of my life. But yeah, I was super blessed in Charleston this past year. College of Charleston, the Cougars, they made it all the way to March Madness. So I was able to cover them. In Orlando, where they nearly beat San Diego State, who went on to go into the championship. So just a great experience being able to, because when you think of Charleston, you don't think of the pros, you don't think of major sports teams, but that was one of the experiences outside of covering the Clemsons and the South Carolinas that was a major event at a big stage. So you kind of got a sense of how everything kind of came together and in all of that regard. But yeah, no, basketball is just something that I think everyone in this industry has a sport that they kind of lean towards over others, but basketball is certainly mine. So when it comes, to the game, you're able to kind of break it down at a different level. Like in Charleston, I was able to be a color analyst for our championship games for high school throughout the state. So I did a lot of different things in Charleston. Then basketball was definitely one that had helped me out.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun for sure. So, yeah, basically, let's go back to DC and now. Obviously, you're still pretty new. So, and last night, as we are recording, the Commanders knocked off the Baltimore Ravens, ending their preseason win streak. Some people don't really care about that. Some people do. It's the preseason. Take it how you want. But how was your experience, your first time at FedEx Field? Take me through that as a newbie in the DC area.
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things about all of this with the new ownership has been the stadium issues. And you see it on the news, again, being an outsider kind of looking in for the last few years. You see the issues, you see those fans fall over the railings last season. So you kind of walk in with this place isn't going to be top notch. I'm not walking into a Mercedes-Benz or anything. But the thing with sports is that there is just some sort of level of romance. Doesn't matter what sort of stadium, field you walk into. It's just a sanctuary in itself. So I still got that feeling walking into FedEx Field. And again, that was my first experience, my first time ever walking into that stadium. So I know a lot of fans are kind of rolling their eyes or like, we're so ready to put this place behind us. But I honestly enjoyed my time there. And it was awesome because, again, that being my first time, I was just talking to people who had been there so many other times and they could notice the improvements, whether it was the huge video monitors that I thought looked amazing, the new audio system, and just walking through the tunnels and in the press conference rooms and everything. There was also improvements to paint, to signage, just those little things that kind of spruce up a room. So it's fun to kind of see and hear people talk rather just about like, oh, hey, that's new. Oh, that's new. So it's cool seeing this new ownership kind of highlighting some of the things that were perhaps neglected under the previous era. So that's always cool to see. But I mean, I could not have started my covering this team in a preseason game or even the season a better way than that game last night. So that is just certainly something I will remember throughout my entire career, because that was something special going on in there.
So, if I could just offer one piece of caution, it's the fact that, yes, you moved to DC, and this typically happens around FedEx too, but around the whole DC metro area. Be aware of traffic.
Oh, gosh.
The traffic sucks, especially getting out of FedEx Field for a regular season game, I would imagine, because preseason isn't well attended. But I hope you were forewarned about that, because the traffic is not the best.
Yeah, no, that is I guess the one small plus of being a part of the media, because your day does not end when the game ends. So I was walking out of FedEx Field last night, or I guess this morning at 2 a.m. So I didn't have to deal with any of the traffic, but I can definitely imagine what it looks like when people are all filing out. And for me to be there last night, I don't, again, know what typical game day crowds look like, but I thought they packed that place out pretty well last night. I'll have to go look back and see if there was an official number of people who had showed up to the game. But I mean, it was loud. It looked like people were covering those seats and just being out there on the sidelines after they had won. I mean, cheers, loud. The people are excited. Yeah, just talking to fans yesterday, we had the opportunity to go walk outside just about an hour or two before kickoff, and they essentially reiterated a lot of what we had heard when we had talked to fans at training camp. They came out loud in droves at training camp, so it was so cool to see that essentially in some level continue into this preseason game, even if it being the preseason game. I don't think these fans care. I think they're just looking for a reason to cheer for this team. And they've got several this year with the new ownership, with a lot of the new upgrades, with just this new kind of resurgence of the fan base. And after last night's game, they have probably a little more reason to be excited about this team, because preseason game or not, I think everyone enjoys a win, especially in a game that comes down to the absolute wire, where fans were on the edge of their seat until Joey Slye knocked down that 49-yard field goal. So a lot of good happened last night, and a lot of good happened not only with the environment, the atmosphere, how cool it was, but I think the level of play that we saw. Granted, Lamar Jackson didn't play, Odell Beckham didn't play. Some of their key guys obviously weren't in there, but in terms of Sam Howell, I think he had taken a step forward. So lots to be excited about just overall. It's cool to see.
Let's rewind again, going back to training camp. You and Scott have been on the beat covering it for pretty much the entirety, either you or Scott, and a lot of great work from you as well, Natalie. But just talk to me about some of the observations you have seen from this Commanders team and what really stood out to you as we approach the start of a new season for the Washington Commanders.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, Scott and I have kind of been tag teaming. I spent a whole week off of training camp to cover the Mubadala City DC Open, which is also probably my second favorite sport to cover, tennis. So tennis fans out there, I'm definitely one of you. So yeah, but no, it's been great to cover the team and kind of watch them and hear them all. I mean, they're so steadfast on what they want to accomplish every single day. I think it's pretty forward in the fact that all of them say, we just want to get better every day. We just want to get better every day. And we've seen that actually. So it's been very cool to see. I was at the joint practices this past week, and I know the big story were all the brawls that had broken out, but, and I know no one wants fights. We don't need it to get to that level, but to see that competitiveness in this team, I think has also been a point of really conversation, because this team hasn't been competitive in years past and in recent years. And I want to go talk about offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, because he's been one of those guys a lot of the players and Rivera have referenced when it comes to bringing the intensity, bringing that level of competition that hadn't been there. So, and we can hear him on the sideline. Josh, I know you have probably heard him as well. Just
oh man, yeah, all the fans could hear him.
Exactly. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why fans wanted to show up, is to hear him and hear his boisterous demeanor and kind of this this demeanor of if you're not going to play and you're not going to compete at a high level, then get off my field type thing. And I think that's not something, it's not something these players have dealt with in years past. And that was also a point of conversation in recent weeks is this going to be good for this team, or if this is just kind of a little bit of growing pains. But I think the team is definitely trending in the right direction. Again, we've only seen them twice on the field so far officially, but we're seeing good things. And I think there was so many question marks, and there are still question marks about what this team will be able to do when it comes to the regular season and when guys like Sam Howell and those starters are playing all 4 quarters. But I think some of those questions are at least starting to get answered or trending in the direction that they could soon be answered.
So talk to me here, because you were a little bit closer than I was since you were media. How loud did you think Eric Bieniemy sounded? Because from where I was standing, he sounded pretty darn loud.
Oh, pretty darn loud. And sometimes you're training camp, there's a million different things going on. You're tweeting, you're watching some guy, you're watching another guy. But then when you hear him yell, you're like military. You whip into shape like so quickly. You think he's like yelling at you. So I know there were some times at joint practices this past week where he was on the closer field. So we were essentially right kind of by him. And I don't know what I was doing, but I think I was sending a tweet out or something, but he had yelled and my heart sank. I thought this man was yelling at me for how nervous I got for those half a seconds. And I think every media member was the same because it just came out of nowhere. And I don't know what even the scenario was. I think he was yelling at Brissett on the sideline or something. But it was one of those moments where you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to focus up a little more. And you're obviously not even on the field.
Yeah, very cool. You recently also did a one-on-one with Ron Rivera. Some very great points he spoke about. What was that like, getting one-on-one interviewing Coach Rivera?
Yeah, and I think I couldn't have asked for my first one-on-one to be Rivera, because anyone who has been covering him for years, and this was even just the kind of the sense I'd gotten from not covering him, but just seeing him in the media, in national media and so on, is that he is just such a genuine guy, not intimidating by any means. So I think as a young journalist like myself, doing a one-on-one with a head coach of a pro football team, I was pretty just excited to I didn't go into the interview at all kind of nervous or thinking like I need to be perfect. I was just like talking to your dad or your grandpa. So he made my job really, really easy. And like even yesterday, he came over to the sidelines before the game and he was talking to some of the media members, shaking my hand and everything. And he's just such a cool dude to be able to cover, because he was saying to Scott and I yesterday, like, my job's easy tonight. I just got to sit and watch. And I told him, like, you've got the best seat in the house, like, good luck and all that good stuff. So he's just a really genuine dude. And he's a guy you want to root for because of that in itself. You want him to do well because, he's here in season 4 at this point, and the results haven't been there. But one of the takeaways I would say came from that one-on-one was that early on a few weeks ago, he had mentioned, hey, the pressure is there, not only to perform and to trend in the right direction, but this team needs to start winning games. And I think the time is now for him to really kind of flip the switch. And maybe those are big shoes to fill, because I think fans just want immediate results and we can't blame them at all. But I think a big step needs to be taken this year in order for him to stick around here in Washington, because you never know what these new owners and kind of what they plan to do now that they're in business.
Maybe you could shed some light on this, because I heard a lot of media members talking about after Sam Howell was officially named the starter for week 1, why did it take so long for them to name Sam Howell the week 1 starter? But in my opinion, I feel like that's a non-issue. Did you seem like the timing of that was off, or what are your thoughts on that?
I really didn't. And I think it was one of those things we were all expecting it. It wasn't a matter of if it was going to be announced. It was just a matter of when. But Rivera was very upfront in the fact that he had told all of us, like, hey, I was waiting to see how Sam would respond in those joint practices. I think that was really the tall tale of, is he going to sink or swim when we put him up against a defense that is not ours? And yes, we saw spurts of it with the Cleveland game, and I think he performed very well. You'd seen him kind of make those mistakes, but then adjust And that was kind of a big point of emphasis of why Rivera and the coaching staff wanted him to be their guy from day one, because he not only was showing that growth in training camp, but he also has that potential to be this guy for this team down the road. And that was another thing I had brought up with Rivera is, hey, you've been here 4 years. You've had 4 different starting quarterbacks. What's different about Sam Howell that can not only make him the guy for this season, but for years going forward? And he said a lot of it had to do with just the amount of time and the amount of reps he got during his college days, where he did outstanding at North Carolina and was able to grow in those systems and then transition here into the NFL. So I think, yeah, again, I don't think it was a issue or anything when it came to that timing. I think it was just a matter of he needs to make sure he's checking off all of these boxes on Sam to ensure that he can 100% be confident in the ability to say, hey, this is our guy.
So you briefly touched on it earlier, but I just want to talk a little bit more about the joint practice with the Ravens. It must have been sort of a different atmosphere practicing against another team at their facility in Owings Mills. But what was that like, sort of covering the joint practice? And did you see a lot of different scenarios going on and play calling and stuff? And what did you like from that aspect of the joint practice as well?
I don't think much changed outside of training camp other than them getting to hit guys that weren't their own guys. And I think that was the cool part of it, because you saw the competitiveness come out, and it was cool to see because we had gotten spurts of it at training camp, especially with the fans out there. Players had said, hey, we love the fans out here because it brings us a little bit of more of that competitive edge to go out there and hit someone and perform. But when you got guys on a different team, and especially in an environment where it's their fans, they're not cheering for the Commanders, they're cheering for the Ravens. So it was cool kind of putting them in that scenario. And I think that's, essentially why things got a little chippy. You got these two teams that have had great histories and in this franchise, or in their respective franchises rather. And so when you get them head to head, it was a really just cool opportunity to see. And I especially for a team that hasn't done joint practices, I believe since 2018, I believe that was so it's been several years since joint practices have taken place. So to see that be another aspect brought back this season and be accepted and wanted by these two teams, I think that was cool to see, especially when things got a little chippy. I think it was a good opportunity to kind of gauge the maturity of this team, and that had been an issue in former years for Rivera. And he had mentioned that, hey, we've got a great group of guys with talent, but the maturity level is lacking there. So I think this was a good test for them to hey, maybe step up to the line, show your worth, show your competitiveness, but then take a step back and not cross the line. Of course, we did see the line cross several times, but I think it was a good little gauge to see just how this team stacked up.
So once again, the Commanders week 1 against the Cardinals. And as always, Toyota Sports Talk, the crew, ABC7, great stuff. I'll be catching you all season long. But before we wrap things up, I kind of want to have a little fun. Since you are a newbie in DC, have you gotten a chance to be a tourist yet?
Not really. I've done some walking around, but someone's got to help me out. Send me recommendations, send me places to go, because I've been, just been getting kind of acclimated the last few weeks. But yeah, I'm going to have to have some fun soon. I'd hope so, right?
Well, I mean, living in DC, in the DC area, I mean, just the history there. I mean, yeah. I live like an hour and a half away. I can never get over, if I'm near DC, I'll just spontaneously go to the National Mall just to see the Capitol, the Monument, so many museums, so much history. And it just, in my mind, that's why I like DC so much, is because you can always go to DC and find something unique and different or something new that you've never seen before.
Yeah, I love that. And that's kind of something I was really blessed at with being in Charleston. It's so historic, a different type of history for our nation's earliest years. But again, that's here in DC. So I did have a chance to do the National Mall. Thankfully, that was one of the first things I wanted to do. And it's just I think favorite part about the area thus far is that it's so pedestrian friendly. I'm a big runner. I'm a big walker. I can just go outside and just walk for hours and be fine with that. And if that's my day. So I think that's one of my favorite parts is that I can just kind of walk around and do whatever. So the National Mall is the perfect place to begin.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully as you get acclimated more and more in the DC area, you'll get to see more and more of the beautiful sights of Washington, DC for sure. But once again, Natalie Spala, great work in your short time so far at ABC7 WJLA. Before we let you go, tell the listeners and the watchers where they can find you, your wonderful work for WJLA.
Yeah, no, of course. So I'm at Twitter at _ Natalie Spala. Tweeting is probably my main thing. On Instagram, just my name, Natalie Spala. I'm trying to get more on there in terms of workflow as well, but Twitter's the best place to find me.
Absolutely. Natalie, it was always a pleasure catching up with you, and appreciate the connection as always. And I hope this is not the last time we can chop it up a lot more during the football season and maybe even basketball season as well.
Oh yeah. Put me on your books for basketball season. We'll dive into that. Some Washington.
We go. There we go. I'm looking forward to that for sure. Thanks to all of our many sponsors of the Kirby on Sports podcast for their continued support. And thanks again to Natalie Spala for joining me on this Kirby on Sports exclusively on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. Make sure you find us on all social media platforms and all streaming platforms. Also, check us out, www.kirbyonsports.com. Our time is up. Until the next time, we say so long and peace out.